Hi, everyone. It's Jimmy. Welcome back to another week of Stage Store Medium. I'm so excited today for our guest. We've got some fun stuff to talk about. There's a question that I've been asked so many times, so I could not have a better guest to discuss it with. And we're talking about haunted houses today, among other things. But as our special guest today is Dana Steingold. So, hi, Dana. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited you're here.
I'm
I
excited to be here.
Dana's credits. So it's funny. I my Dana, your credits are, oh gosh, you've done so many cool things. So if you're listening, Dana Steingold was in the national tour of the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. You were in The Visit. You've done City Center Encores with Anyone Can Whistle, Beetlejuice, and it's funny. I'm a little dated. I'm a little behind on things, and I remember one of my students was talking the one day about you, and they're obsessed with your song from Beetlejuice, the Girl Scout song. They're like, and they brought up Dana Steingold, and I'm like, or they're like, wait, from Beetlejuice, and I'm like, wait, from the 2010 production of Into the Woods at Kansas City Rep, and they're looking at me like,
Sure.
what are you talking about? And so I'm I was I'm a little dated. Like for example, like people will be watching current shows and they're like, what are you watching? I'm like, this crime drama. And they're like, what is it? I'm like, Murder She Wrote. And they're like, oh, like I'm so behind, Dana. And they're like, well, what channel? I'm like, DVD. So and so
That's great.
anyway,
There's something really beautiful about doing that, though, just being
being very
present with
behind
where
on
you
time.
are and ignoring like the status quo. I think that's beautiful.
That's me. And I have to tell you,
Yeah.
your performance, and I know I told you, but for our viewers, it has stuck with me 10 years later. And I remember you were the most, it was like the darkest, grisliest, like she had this like odd fast. I mean, Little Red Riding already does have this odd fascination with like the morbid, but like I remember after the line, like for all that I know, she's already dead, you let out this like creepy, like Annabelle giggle, and it just stuck with me. And I remember you were like tickling like Claiborne Elder's chest, and it was
Sure.
just one of those performances that um I can tell you was so good that if 10 years later, if a student brought up the name Dana Steingold and I remembered it, that says something. So
Thank
anyway,
you.
I'm glad you're here. I would love if we could start. I didn't know if you would be able to talk about your background with theater. Like, did you always know that you wanted to be a performer?
I think kind of subconsciously. I was a really precocious kid, and luckily, my parents gave me three siblings. So I had like an entire theater troupe in my home. So I sort of employed them all the time, and we put on shows, kind of like everyone does. I think everyone has a space in their house that's like the stage. So for me, it was the fireplace, and behind the couch was backstage. So I got to star in the shows, direct the shows, cast them, and produce them. So my siblings spent a lot of time behind the couch, and I starred in all the shows and gave myself all the good lines.
That
And I,
was sweet too.
yeah, so and I think I was just rambunctious, and I had a lot of energy. And my parents were like, "You need to stop approaching people at the grocery store and trying to talk to them and sing for them." So they put me in dance classes, and I kind of liked it and I picked up on things really quickly. And when I was 7, my friend was auditioning for a local theater, and that they were doing The King and I, which, let's recognize the time we're in now, not an appropriate show for me to be doing, but here we are telling the story. And I begged my parents to let me audition. And they were like, "You have nothing prepared." And I was like, "I'm going to be fine." And I did a whole performance of Part of Your World with like full choreography. I like laid on the ground, like with my legs out, like they were fins. Don't recommend that. But I got it. And I was Princess Ying Yawalik. And I think
Is that the
basically my
one?
mom,
Is that the one that writes the letter that's like, please do not go away? And like I
yeah,
cried every time in the movie.
yeah. She's
Keep
the one
going.
with like the speech at the end. Um, and I just like remember after the very first show hearing applause, and that was it for me. Like I was like instantaneous. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I told my mom right after, I was like, "Did you hear them clapping for me?" And my mom was like, "That probably wasn't just for you, but we'll let that go." And I just kind of never stopped from there. And there was never really a moment that I thought about doing anything else, strangely, I think. At one point, I did want to be a criminal psychologist because I was obsessed with the practice and I was fascinated by the idea, which I think, psychology and acting go hand in hand anyway. So it seems like a natural fit. But yeah, I found my way to a theater camp in the Catskills called Stage Door Manor. And I think that's where it really landed for me that this could be a career. And eventually went to NYU for musical theater.
I gotta interject really quick because you brought up this really neat point about applause. And can I ask, at what point as an actress or an actor, what point does the idea of applause transition to something different? Because you brought it up, you said it best. Like as kids, it's very much like that gold star, that extrinsic. Does it ever switch? And do you view applause as something different now? Or as an audience member, if you were in the theater, do you view it as something different?
Yeah. Now, I will say, as an adult, curtain calls are one of the most embarrassing times for me where I find myself apologizing a little bit. And I try really hard not to do it because people want to see you be like you've reached the pinnacle of your performance. They want to applaud you. And so I have to remind myself that it's for the audience and not for me. But that switches. I think it's somewhere when self doubt kicks in and the self judgment starts, and you start nitpicking your own performance, like, ooh, that was like a not my best version of this today, or wow, it really took me like 45 minutes to get going there, or the perception we have as actors of like that was not a crowd that was into it at all, and then they erupt in applause at the end, so I think it does take on a different thing as you age, just because there's self-judgment. So now I'm always like, let's let this be over. Thank you so much.
Well, even based on a different country, applause is such a different thing too, where it's almost become. I was reading a part of like an American tradition that we have to stand and do standing ovations. Where I was reading with British theater, it's not often, it's not all the time, and it's very much like a "did you earn it" type of thing. It's such a fascinating that I think in America, it's very much like a part of our P's and Q's, and the applause, and everyone just knows to stand. And I know I always tell my students that the applause. I was working with younger ones, and then I work with older ones, and it's neat seeing that transition happen as they get older. They start to see that the applause and the bows are that moment to acknowledge people as just humans, not as Girl Scout or a Little Red. It's just it's Dana Steingold. And so I know it's something I've always thought of. And can I ask? I mean, going into was spelling bee, was that one of the first big breaks for you professionally?
Definitely. I actually left my college graduation early. Like I walked and then went to my final callback. And I actually like called my agent at the time and said, like, do you think they could push the time back like 45 minutes? Because I really like to walk in graduation, which is not really something you do, but they thankfully obliged and let me come a little bit later. And my parents were in town because it was graduation, and they were in New York City and didn't really know where to go. So I remember like I brought them to Chelsea Studios with me, and I made them wait downstairs at what was a Chipotle at the time. And made them wait there because it would be incredibly unprofessional if they came upstairs. Um, and I remember having that final call back, and I didn't hear for weeks. And I just thought like, okay, well, it didn't go my way. That's okay. It was like one of my first big auditions, and I got to meet, Bill Finn and James Lapine, who were two of my idols growing up. So I was like, whatever, like on to the next. And I was obsessed with Thoroughly Modern Millie during my senior year. I was obsessed with Sutton Foster. I went and saw it like 6 times. And I was coming down the escalator of the Marriott Marquis when I got the call that I got the job. It's like a very New York, full circle story. So it was
So
definitely my big
beautiful.
break. Yeah. And to be like where someone inspired you so much and then have that moment happen for you was really exciting. And then it was sort of like grad school because it was a bunch of us sort of in our first big jobs. That cast was crazy looking back now. It was like Lauren Worsham and Sarah Stiles and Eric Peterson and Miguel Cervantes and just everybody, Jen Samard. People went on to do such incredible things, but we were kind of all like, it was our first big job pretty much. Sarah had come from the New York company, so she had done, a lot of stuff before. But we just toured the country and we were like 21, 22, 23, and we just had the best time. And I learned so much.
That show's so
So
beautiful.
much.
So beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
And I feel like it's a very traditional, like, I mean, with Bill Finn and James Lapine, like, I feel like you could, I hate to say it, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but you could see a really bad production of it and still walk away going, it's beautiful. Like it's still like, I've seen some real doozies of Into the Woods, but you still walk away and you're like, damn, that's an airtight show. You know what I mean? Even if it's not acted
Totally.
or sung to perfection. And God, there's so many moments in your spelling bee. Was Sally Wilford with you guys?
Yes. So Sally joined us. Jen moved to the company in New York about like 6 months in, and then Sally came. And she's also like, talk about a magnificent energy and spirit. Like, just.
She's on the show. She's coming on.
Oh, you're so lucky. I love her.
I know.
Like,
I'm very lucky.
Just everything about her is a hug. Like, that's sort of like what I describe her as, like her voice, her essence, but like not fake nice either. Like warm, but confident and honest too. It's so special. She's just very special.
She said so many sweet things to me after the reading. She was like, I feel like, and it's not giving anything away. I mean, she just was like, this really, like, I'm digesting all of this. I'm processing all of this. And like, she was just lovely. And keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, not at all. She's wonderful. And yeah, it just was like this really beautiful experience. And I think the show, much like a lot of the work I've actually done now that I'm thinking back on it, it celebrates the weirdness in all of us. And I feel like I often do get cast in shows where we kind of get to let our freak flag fly a little bit. And that is sort of the most therapeutic part about playing parts like that too, is there's no wrong. You act instinctually because that's what children do. That's kind of the beauty of playing kids. Like, you go from 0 to 10 so quickly with no in between, and adults don't really do that. We like stifle everything. So it's sort of like the most honest way in terms of like scene work. It's just such an interesting thing. But I think the show's so deeply funny that even a bad production just works.
Good.
Just works. I hope ours was good, but I think it was. But even so,
I am certain of it. I remember it came through town, but it's funny at the time, like, I would have been what? I would have been in college, when it was coming through. I think I was a freshman and stuff, but you don't see all of them. Like now I try to see everything. And it's funny, like I guess going on to Beetlejuice is probably the one show pre-shutdown that I hadn't seen. And I didn't know well, that's the other thing that I wanted to ask you. This is something that's always interested me, the topic, because, for example, like I say this all the time about, I guess, about what I do as a medium, that you could be the greatest medium in the world, but if you give people an ick factor, I just feel like if your personality is, I hate to say it, pretty shitty, like you will not go far as a medium. And can I ask, do you find, like, is that common in the arts as well? I've always wondered, like, if reputation will help you to book a job or hinder you versus, because I mean, if we're in a talent pool and all the talent's the same, will reputation, do you find, make or break somebody from getting a job?
I think definitely. I can tell you the amount of times someone has said to me, "Oh yeah, we spoke to so and so about you after I booked the job." Because I think when you're casting, especially a new musical, it's really, a lot of people can execute the job, but there's a certain level of stress that everyone's going to be under, a certain amount of hours needed, a certain amount of flexibility, and sort of like humor about themselves as well. And people want to be able to hang out with people and have a drink after. And one person who has toxic energy, or I call them caution yellow tapes, because I don't want to say that someone's like a toxic, because a lot of people aren't bad people, but they don't realize how their energy is affecting other people and taking it down. And it's, absolutely, I think most actors are like empaths by nature, and they absorb, because otherwise you couldn't go out and like expose yourself the way you do. So I think it only takes one. And I've definitely been in those companies where it's been like, there's one person and it sort of takes everybody down. It's very hard to remove yourself from that scenario. So I call them caution yellow tapes, because there's just like that tape around them where you're like, stay 10 feet away, like be kind, do all those things, but you don't have to like engage that deeply. But yeah, I think reputation is everything, because, you know, ultimately you may get a job if you have a bad reputation, but you won't get a second one, if that makes sense. Like with the same director or same creative team, because all it takes is one time for it to go bad. And there's someone else in line who's easier to work with. And that's just sort of the reality.
Yeah. I say that all the time.
Yeah. And honestly, I think people always say like, what was so special about Beetlejuice? And for me, it was sort of like this perfect grouping of people who took the work seriously but didn't take themselves seriously. And I think that was sort of like the secret sauce. And I think that's what Alex Timbers does really, really well in a casting room, is he can kind of gauge that energy of like who's cool, who's like relaxed, and he kind of puts all those people together, because you're creating a family and it's a long commitment. It's not just like going to work and going home. Building a show is like you're building a whole baby together. So it's several years, honestly, of a commitment, and for the most part. Well, tensions get high. The stress level gets really high. People are trying to get enough sleep, stay healthy. We're learning new scenes in the upper lobby, but teching the scene that's going in this evening because we're not ready to put that version on stage. So sometimes you have like version A, B, and C floating around of each scene. And the thing that you want are people who can just kind of like roll with the punches, keep their cool under pressure, and still have a good laugh, and just be like, I'm really tired today, guys. Like, I'm going to raise my hand and say, this is enough pages for me today. Can we put this one in tomorrow? Yeah, but it's just, tensions get high. And I think what people forget is that theater is a team sport. And that's kind of what's beautiful about it, is how collaborative it is. But I think people start to put themselves first in the version of their team, and then you start to run into like a problem. Yeah. So it's cool to be, when you're building a new show, to be with a group of people who are sort of like, you trust every single person on stage, everyone has each other's backs, and we're like, if this falls apart, which inevitably happens, you tech one version and accidentally like the newer version goes in and you have 16 like pages less of music, and all of a sudden people are running across the stage to new lights, and you're like, oops, the number's over, which happened. You know, and you have to be able to kind of come off and laugh about it. So yeah, I think it's about keeping your cool under pressure and just being like, we're not robots. This is live, you know?
And that was one of the reasons why, that's one of the things that I try to spotlight on this show, is that these are humans up on stage. And I feel like sometimes as an audience member, so many of them fall guilty. And I'm going to say it, especially the diehard fans fall guilty of treating the performers sometimes as machines that pump out these performances. And because somebody, I forgot who it was, said it best recently. They were talking about, sometimes they view it as like, well, Elphaba didn't hit her notes today. It's like, well, okay, no, this performer struggled. Like, we're human. And it's your fan base. I would love to talk about it though, because I'm going to be honest. I know we're going into Beetlejuice. I've never seen the movie. I've never seen that show. And I've started watching a slime tutorial, as they call them, on YouTube, where it's like, you know, emo girl meets, you know, dead man and says name thricely or something like that. And
it's like, this is definitely not Beetlejuice on Broadway.
Definitely not the musical. Slime tutorial. And can I ask, like, your fan base, like now that I know more about it, they are crazy support, like crazy in the best way, like fiercely supportive of this show. And I saw like there were like fights breaking out on YouTube, for God's sake, about like, you know, about like this person is a, you know, they, you know, they talked to me after the show and I could just see that raw emotion. Like, they want to know everything about your lives. And what is it like having a fan base that's that supportive of a show?
You know, it's like, it's overwhelming in both the most positive way, and also sometimes overwhelming. It can be hard emotionally. I think the beautiful thing about our show is it was sort of fan made and raised up by the fans. I think we were so proud of what we were doing. We knew what we were presenting and we thought it was great and funny and we believed in it. But it we took a trajectory that I don't think very many shows, maybe none ever. I think the closest probably is Wicked, but that was without social media, so it was a little bit different. Um, that our show was taken, like something that opened to mixed reviews that was kind of chugging along. We thought we maybe were going to close in September. And then we got like 8 Tony nominations, and the Tony performance kind of changed everything for us, and the cast album coming out. And then TikTok happened, and all of a sudden our show just was like, boom. And that energy, like you can feel it in the audience, how excited people were. And our stage door started to go from like 20 people to 50 people to all of a sudden there were 350, 400 kids wrapped around the block in cosplay. Like they had to keep ordering more barriers from the Schubert organization because we were getting like trapped kind of like inside. But it was like the most beautiful thing because I think at the center of our show, we celebrate a real girl who isn't like a princess or trying to get a guy. That wasn't the ultimate goal. It was just a real girl with raw emotions talking about anxiety and grief and depression. And so many people, it resonated with so many teenagers and adults and the diehard cult fans
Yeah.
from the movie. So it was really beautiful because the amount of people who felt they had no one, as soon as it gets too overwhelming and you're like, wow, this is a lot of energy that's being thrown toward me and I'm just a human, like I don't have any magical answers for you. Then you would meet somebody at the stage door who said, I had no one, I felt so alone, and I found this person on social media and we both loved Beetlejuice and we met at the show and we came in cosplay and like now I have a friend and it saved me. The show saved me. And I think it's so silly because it's Beetlejuice, but it really touches me that so many kids um, who felt unseen, and I think we can all
Yeah.
empathize with that, and we've all felt that way at some point, or felt like we had nowhere to go and that life was hopeless. Um, it just proves you only need one person to see you, to fully see you, to keep pushing forward. So that is both intrinsically beautiful, but also overwhelming because I guess it comes with a sort of power that you have to own also, and a responsibility to be careful about things you're posting on social media, be careful about how you connect with everybody. I always try to answer direct messages if I can, but also I can't have like a long-standing friendship conversation with you because that's not my role, you know? So
Yeah.
it's such an interesting dynamic. But that being said, I think more than maybe any company, our cast is like completely overwhelmed with the fan base and so grateful to them because they're kind of like part of the extended family of
Yeah.
our show and why we're here, honestly.
I know you bring up such a good it's such a great point about this idea of, where do we draw the line with, and the same thing will happen with sometimes with a reading where, I would like to think that I'm friendly and warm and approachable. And then, you do have people after a reading that will want to start to like email you a bunch to like, like just talk, or like, hey, I have more questions for you. Or like there is a point where, and you do have to draw that line a little bit just for your own, like as much as I love what I do, it's it is also a job, and I very much have to, and I know you guys identify with it. There's off hours, and it's, same thing with my posting. I know my social media is new, but um it's interesting, like mediumship, like back in the day, mediumship was all word of mouth. You
Yeah.
went to a medium because somebody else recommended this person, and now it is, I mean, yes, it's still word of mouth, but it's also changing. And I'm like, oh, I need like I need a website. I need like people, because it's the demographic is different too. You have a new generation of people that are growing up with mediums, and they might not necessarily want the mediumship component, but they want to talk about empaths, and they want it. It's a very different ballgame in 2020 as a medium, I think, than it might have been for a medium in 1970 or 1980. And um, you brought up another great point. I was always wondering, as a performer, You see these performances, I know that are, that are bootlegged and where the crowd just goes wild. And I always say too, like as a medium, I get into a rhythm. So if I have somebody, for example, that's interrupting me a lot during a reading, I always say it's like a conversation. And there's going to be moments where I'm like, can we, I don't understand, what does this message mean? Or, but if they start interrupting me too much, I kind of have to gently go, nope, I'm moving on, because like my brain, it has to stay focused over with who I'm trying to channel. When you have these performances where they go, and I've been in the audience and I find it distracting. Does it just like, does it throw the cast, like when the crowds are super crazy supportive, is it also disruptive or distracting?
It rarely, I will say our show, it's almost more disruptive when they're quiet. I will say, like a Wednesday matinee is always like, okay, here we go. Just because our show is sort of, it kind of turned into almost like a Rocky Horror situation. And what's interesting is I would say 99% of it is scripted, but because Alex is so good on his feet and Leslie and everybody, um, like they're able to kind of like roll with the punches of the audience as well. And Alex could break the fourth wall and say something. So if it ever did get out of control, he was really good at being like, hey, you, I'm gonna need you to take it down, or like whatever he needed to do as Beetlejuice, he was able to do it freely. It only, we had a few times where somebody would sort of get out of control and we would need to like monitor the situation. But it was pretty rare. Uh, the only thing that truly distracts me, I will say, is it's when people are filming. Um, and and bootlegs are so, it's like beautiful because like you're getting to watch one right now and connect with the show. And it's also, there's so many kids who couldn't get to New York and wanted to see it. And I have faith they'll see it, but that's a whole nother thing. Um, but it's hard. Like the internet is forever and things sit there and you can't get it taken down and you have no control over it. And kind of what you were speaking to a minute ago about how people are human, like you also never know the circumstances that people are dealing with that day and also how they ended up on that stage that day. So, for example, sometimes you'll play the Girl Scout in the matinee and Lydia in the evening, and you'll find out at 7:15 that that's happening, and you won't have had the mental headspace to, prepare the way you'd like to. Or sometimes you're sick and the person who's playing the part is sick, and only two people are already out, so you have to go on,
Yeah.
and you can't call out for 2 more days. So you got to like chug the honey and take Robitussin and do whatever you got to do to get out there because it's holiday season and we're down like 5 swings. So people don't understand, I think, that it's like a moment in time, and when they put things on the internet, they're forever, and you're basically making now you're forming an opinion based off of one moment, not a full journey of somebody's performance. Or when people do like, who sings the best, like whatever they do, you know what I mean? Like,
I know those
you're like, those are
compilations.
the worst. The worst also because everyone is so unique and does their own thing, and you can't experience energy through a bootleg. Like you just can't. It's so specific. But I think it's interesting that you talked about that, because I think when you're saying like people interrupting you, I think in a way like what you do is similar to an actor in that like you're the bridge between two worlds, right? And so like as an actor, I'm on stage, and even though my character isn't distracted, like Dana the actor can be distracted because I'm trying to tell you the story and you're getting in the way.
The other thing that I'm so excited to talk with you about, because I feel like, especially with the question that I get asked all the time, I mean, is I think my house is haunted, is what I hear all the time. I, and Beetlejuice is literally about like, yes, there's like the demon, but it's about a haunted house.
Yeah.
And can I ask, with like, do you have any experience or stories like in the Winter Garden where you felt like, I guess either spooked out, or did you ever sense energy in that theater from people that aren't physically here?
Yes, certain rooms have stronger energy than others. And I think there are different people who've had in our company who've had different experiences in those rooms. And we're like, okay, no, that chair like flipped over, nothing happened.
Sure.
But there's so much history. I think that's every Broadway theater, but the Winter Garden has so much history. And you actually spoke about it in my reading, but the one thing that did happen to me often was there was something in my dressing room that kept moving all the time. And I was like, I'm so confused. Like, I know I left it here, and it used to be like it was here, and now it's just like 3 inches to the right, but I would never leave it there because so one of my things is that I'm incredibly relaxed, except that I'm extremely, I would say, I guess, I don't want to say that I like to have things the same way. I'm a little bit like creepy like that. So I put my things on in the same order every day. I don't want to call it OCD or
Methodical. Methodical is a good
superstitious.
word.
Yeah, like, or, yeah, methodical. It's not even superstition. It's just like, these are the things I have to do. And I eat this thing at this time during the show. And like, that's what I do. And so I know that I would not have left this thing there because it goes over there. Do you see what I'm saying? So I would come up all the time. And in my reading, a mentor came through and said that he was moving a thing. You had asked me if someone had been moving things, if you ever noticed things moved in your dressing room. And I said, yes. And my mentor came through and said that it was him trying to keep me present, which was so funny to me because he was the most present actually to me at the Winter Garden, strangely, just because he never got to see it. And I feel like it would have been, he would have loved the show because it's just like that dark, sick humor that he loves so much. And he's the loudest laugher. And I also had this is a real thing. And I don't think I've only talked to 2 people about this actually. The
So
first
Beetlejuice
time,
fans, listen in. You heard it here first.
you heard it here first. The very first time I went on as Lydia, I swear to God, I looked to the right during Dead Mom, and stage right, and I swear I saw Michael sitting there smiling like this, like, which is how we used to sit. And it almost like I almost forgot my lines. Like it took me back a little
Goosebumps
bit.
right now.
And I told like 2 other people, and I was like, I know that's like crazy. And I was clearly like putting that on. I mean, I have no idea. I was like, that can't be. But it's also like this thing that I know he would have been there for. So when he came through in my reading and you talked about that, I was like, that's so interesting. So actually the most present ghost of the Winter Garden has been my own personal ghost, I think. But I very much believe in that. So.
And it's a great jumping off point. So, I mean, and I'm going to be very honest. It's funny. Like as a medium, I have very, very, very different views than ghost hunters do. I really don't believe that souls are trapped. I don't think it's fair. However, oh gosh, and please bear with me, Dana. I know, because I know I feel like it, but for me, it's important, especially on this type of podcast, to talk about. I like to describe some of the ghosts and spirits that inhabit theaters. Imagine like those people that you see at your 10-year and then your 20-year reunion out of high school that are still like the same people as they were in high school. It's like those people that didn't grow up. So no, they're not spirits that are stuck. They're people that they're energies that like attention. And so, and many times when people will talk about going to these haunted locations, and we have a fort, right near us that they market at Halloween as haunted. And as a medium, I've been to many spots and I'm like, there's nothing here. There's literally nothing here, because if they've got their own shit to do on the other side, if I can be blunt, they don't want to hang around an old military base and like
Right.
spook people out. And so I think a better word, I know we spoke about this earlier, but a better word that I can use is called imprinting. So if you're listening at home and you're like, what is that? It is, everything is energy, is what I always say. And we leave imprints wherever we go. So I often say theaters. Another really great example are antique stores. Those places are heavily imprinted. So there's many times as when you'll get people that are sensitive to energy, sometimes they will mistake that and think that they're currently picking up on a ton of spirits in an antique shop or a ton of spirits in a theater. It's really not. It's these places have been again, I know I keep using the word imprinted with energy. I mean, the Winter Garden has had so many incredible, I mean, like, God, if I could go back in time and watch Barbara Streisand's performance of Funny Girl, like
Oh, I know.
I like that isn't like, and if you're listening at home, if you just got goosebumps, you're like, oh my God, me too. That's an imprint. All of that energy of seeing like somebody who's now this supernova star, like who was made there, that imprints there. Mamma Mia, it doesn't matter if it isn't like the musical, like doesn't have the greatest book or like the energy
Yeah,
that
but
was created in that theater. Same for Beetlejuice. So many times, and this could easily be on a home level. If you walk into a home and you're like, I don't like how this house feels. So many times, people, because of what we've been taught in pop culture and movies, and we're taught that there's like a demon in it or like a bad spirit. It's not. It's you're many times it's just empaths. And so many people think, oh, only psychics and mediums are the only ones that are empathic. Wrong. Almost all actors are empathic. And so you can go into a space and go, I just feel kind of skeezed out here. Like it feels like we have a hotel in Buffalo that I could only go in once. I went in for drinks, and because it used to be an old psych center that they had turned into a hotel, and there was a lot of like bad stuff that happened in this space. Like people were tortured, and basically things that you saw on like American Horror Story season 2 like happened in that space. And people love to come back going like, oh, the ghosts are still there. And again, that's not true. It's just that energy lingers in that space. And you're not, most of the time I'm also asked, what do you do if you do encounter those yucky spaces? And, do they go home with you? Or again, it's just, you can sage, if this is your home and you're listening at home, you're like, I think I've got some yucky spaces. Everything's about intention. You can sage out. You can say, I break up, and I do it before every reading, actually. Even if it's digital, like before I met with you, I said, I break up and I release any stagnant energy in this space. I ask that it leave, and that we create only room for Dana Steingold's highest and best loved ones, family and friends, because again, it lingers. If I'm having a bad day and I come into the studio super pissy, all of a sudden it's like a little cloud that happens in between, you and I. And so yeah, I don't doubt that you saw your mentor. Can I ask, did you see him like you see me right now, or was it more like something up here, like almost like tracing paper?
it it felt like I saw him. Um, and I know like all the seats were filled. So I know it's not like when I came back on stage, it was and I looked again, like I had to look again.
Yeah.
And it was a totally like a woman who looked nothing like him. So it's why it made no sense to me. And I was like, wow, my mind is either playing tricks on me or like really good ones today, or Michael came.
And
Um,
that's what we call subjective seeing, or excuse me, objective. Subjective during a reading is like I kind of see it in my mind's eye. Objective seeing is like, and we've had it happen. Many of it, like you said, like we see them, like you and I see each other. But because it takes so much energy for the deceased to do that, it's usually only like a split second, and then they're gone because it drains them. Where subjective seeing, they don't have to do something like that. We can just kind of sense what they looked like. But keep going. I'm so sorry.
no, it's just interesting, and it was just such a crazy thing. And he is always present with me just because, and we talked about this in my reading, just because the teachings and all the things that he taught me, he was such a formative teacher for me that I think about him all the time. If I don't land a joke, I was just saying this to somebody else who I was writing a little piece on him. And I was like, if I don't land a joke, I'm always like, I go back to the basics and I'm like, it's my diction. It's obviously my diction 95% of the times. And that's such a Michael note to give. And just something he would always say. And it's just, he sort of left us quickly. And it was one of those weird things that I should say, I was just very moved when he came through. I think I got a little teary just because
Sure.
I was actually, he came to the city. I hadn't seen him in like 6 months. He came, I was doing Avenue Q at the time, and I was doing double duty, and I was doing the Beetlejuice workshop at the same time. So I'd been doing it for 3 weeks and we were right at the end and I was exhausted. And he came to Avenue Q and I was so happy he was there. But, you know, a normal performance, I would never be like, that wasn't the best thing I've ever done. I'm just like, that was today. But because someone you care about in a real way, I think like when you know someone close to you is there, like the pressure is always like way worse when my parents are there or someone. It's not because anything they've put on me. It's just like you want to make them proud. Rather than like strangers, famous people. I'm like, whatever, that's fine. But my parents, oh God.
No.
So he was there and I just was like, oh, I'm exhausted. And everyone went out. And after the show, and he was like, go home, you need sleep. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I'll be back in 2 weeks because he was coming back to see another student who's another good friend of mine open in the band's visit in his Broadway debut. And I said, okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And he passed 10 days later. So I've always had this like weird regret that like I didn't go out that evening and he didn't get to see the culmination of like why I had to go home.
Sure.
You know, it's like all this stuff. And I know that he wouldn't have cared, but it's just so interesting. And like actually the day before he passed was my wedding anniversary. And I'll like never forget this because he wrote something that felt so, it was almost like he knew he was going to pass, which is so weird because he died of a heart attack and you can't know that kind of thing. But he just basically said like, I love you and I'm so happy you have such a beautiful relationship in your life. And like, I can't think of anybody more deserving than this, of this and love you so much. And I was like, oh, that's such a final thing to put on somebody's, felt almost like a farewell statement. And then he passed the next day, which is so bizarre. So yeah, he's with me every time I sing that lyric in a show where it's like, I miss you every day, you know, or like, mama, if you're listening, doesn't this just blow your mind? I always think of him because I'm like levitating and I'm just like, doesn't this, excuse me, freaking blow your mind? Like I made it here and like, I'm sorry you're not here to see this, but like, doesn't this kind of blow your mind? I'm floating at the Winter Garden right now. Like I'm levitating at the Winter Garden.
This
Yeah.
is so special to me too, because like, if you are a fan of Beetlejuice watching this just gives me goosebumps because it's like, it gives you such a rare glimpse of like what these actors are thinking of when they're channeling these. You know, I just did a reading for somebody and I won't say who in case, you know, they don't want me to mention it. I'm hoping they'll talk about it, but I brought somebody through for them and I was like, do you talk to them like right before the show? And they're like, every night right before, I can't even say how they entered, but it was really cool. They're like, I would always directly, and for me, like as a medium, it's so special to know that like, you know, like, I don't know, because I can see it sometimes when I see the performances. I'm like, oh, I know they're thinking of someone here. And can I ask you out of curiosity, did he have glasses?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the reason I have to ask, did he have like a Steve Jobs vibe to him?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're watching at home, I always love to answer because whenever I would go to like a medium growing up, they never tell you what they're seeing on our end. And for me, like maybe like I was always more fascinated in the backstage aspects of musicals than I think sometimes, you know, I would get that obstructed seat and somebody's like, what a shitty seat you have. And I'm like, this is the best. I'm like, because I can see the track that's going on backstage. So as a medium, I love to explain what I'm seeing. So when I can say it, I mean, because I know you did mention it, and you know, Michael was a mentor of yours at Stage Door Manor. And I remember after I read, I asked you, I was like, I think you had been asking him to come through for the reading. And is that correct?
Yeah.
And I am a firm believer, and that's why before I book a reading with somebody or after, I always send them a video and say, whoever you want to come through, tell them, because what happens is like when we put out that intention, they tug on it and then they relay it to me. And I looked at the top of your note after we read, and it said something like, for me, when I write, it's very stream of consciousness. And I had friend mentor, and I thought it was the same, separate people. And I was like, oh, this is the same person. I'm like, and so if you're wondering what it looks like on my end, they showed me a man, because remember, we can only our ability to identify people is, for me as a medium, is based off of people that I already know or established images. So what he did was, because they want to make the most of their time because it's difficult for them energetically to stay for a long time.
Sure.
And I don't want to be sitting there with you like for an hour going, and like I'm painting a criminal sketch. So he literally flashed me the image of Steve Jobs, and then he had little glasses. So, because they have to work quickly. So I knew, I was like, okay, this is what he looks like. And then, so that's the clairvoyant aspect. And then again, like I talked about, it's this delicate dance of channeling so many different abilities. He started hitting my heart. And so that's clairsentience. If you're listening at home, you're like, so you feel pain temporarily. So I always make the joke with my husband. I'm like, one day, if I, God forbid, if I am having an illness, I'm like, I'm screwed, because I'll just think, oh, who's coming through? And it's like, I'm having a heart attack. But he hit it repeatedly. And so that's when you, as a medium, if you've been practicing for a while, then you start to just go with the the clear cognizance, which is just clear knowing. And in that instant, I knew that this was something that he struggled with for a while. And I remember you're like, no, this was a condition, and then again, he showed me an image of a sock, a plug being just yanked out of the wall, which just meant, and if I hear a snap, it just means we go. And so he was really clear. He was lovely. And it's funny, now I've read some more people that, I can say it. Julia Murney went to Stage Door Manor. And so I brought up a mentor for her, and she was like, I don't know who this is. And then when I interviewed her, she was like, well, I was hoping that Michael would have come up. And I'm like, mentor? I was like, I literally asked you during the reading, I was like, who's the mentor that would have been fiercely supportive of you and would have been like obsessed with your talent? And she was like, that's Michael. So I'm like, I
I
told
know.
you during the reading, but we go deer in the headlight, and we're like,
Totally.
oh,
It's a lot to absorb at once. And it's so funny because afterward, Julia actually told me she spoke to you and she was like, it didn't hit me, but it was
did she?
Michael. Yes. And I ran into her and I was with someone else, a mutual friend who also went to summer camp with us. And then I told my text chain of my summer camp friends. And one of my friends was like, oh, just like Michael, to try to get into all of our readings. Like, make himself the star of our readings. Like,
So, and I have to ask, I guess, how does like Jimmy the Medium come up between you and Julia Murney then? Like, how did that even come up?
oh, we were both volunteering for God's Love We Deliver, and we were delivering meals. And she mentioned that she actually said to me, she was like, it's so funny. I was thinking about you guys because I did this thing and I was doing this podcast, and I got read by a medium, and he said that someone came through and I couldn't figure out who it was. And later I realized it was obviously Michael. And then he came through very strong in mine. And then the text ensued about how he's still trying to upstage us all from heaven,
Absolutely.
from the other side.
And that's so funny, because the vibe I got was very much like this idea of, in the most loving, supportive way. It was like, this guy was so skilled at what he was doing. He was like, okay, you're doing it a little bit wrong. Let me do it like this. And then like I see him doing the whole freaking number just to like, because he was, I would have got to have been in his presence. He just seems magical.
Yeah, he was. It was that kind of like, I think the best teachers are the ones that they push you as far as you can go to the point where you think you might break, and then give you so much love. I think there's those amazing teachers that they don't quite put you back together in that way, but it's like he was hard on you, and he always treated us like adults. We were like 12 and 13, but he talked to us like we were professionals and we were like 25.
Yeah.
And because of him, nothing rattles me, I think, in the business, because I had someone screaming at me, when I was 12 that I needed to be better. But it came from so much, love. And when he laughed, it was so guttural and so real. So you knew you had earned it.
Yes.
And I think that's like why for him to miss Beetlejuice was so, such a upsetting thing. And I think for him to miss our other friend in the band's visit, these are things that he always used to say, things like, watching his students succeed was like better than anything. It was like the best possible thing for him. And I would sit in audiences with him where he would just like weep. And another friend of mine made his Broadway debut also like in that same year. right after his passing, and I know he's there with us, but it just is, you know, a light that kind of went
Yeah.
too soon. But he did live a very full life and touched a lot of people in that time and so many students. And
Well,
um,
rest assured that Michael does not have to watch bootlegs on YouTube. Michael can come to your theater. He does not have to pay premium seats for a
no,
weekend via, he will hang out backstage. So
yeah.
if you had to be stuck in a theater and had to watch like the same performance over and over every night, what show would you pick?
Oh, that's so hard. I, I really did like, really, really, really did like Thriller Amount of Millie. But I think if I could go backward, I would be in the audience for Sunny in the Park with George with Bernadette Peters. And I would watch it. I know I can watch it on tape, but it's not the same as being there. And I worshipped that recording growing up.
And
So
those recordings back then kind of look like our equivalent of bootlegs today. Like the
yes,
bootlegs on
totally.
YouTube are like way clearer than they were back there. You're like, I think this is Bernadette Peters.
Yeah.
Uh, you're like, this might be just an audience member that they're filming at this moment. Like it was all grainy and it was like
Yes.
360. Um, oh gosh, what character have you played that could benefit from a medium?
Oh, definitely Little Red Riding Hood. She could really benefit from a medium, especially. I mean, the beautiful thing about her is that there is a demonic, I mean, she's obsessed with things that are morbid. Everyone's dying in her wake, and she's like seemingly unaffected by it. She could really benefit from a medium. I think she needs to talk to her grandmother, who would knock some sense into her about all her choices.
That grandmother's also super morbid too, and I remember distinctly from the DVD, the woman, the brilliant actress who played Red's grandmother, and she was like, "Oh, I know." She's like, "We'll fill his belly up with some great big stones." She goes, "And then we'll watch him try to run away." And it's like it's branded up here. I'm like, "Oh, she's sick too." Um,
Yeah.
well, so your Girl Scout character, her name is Sky, correct?
Mhm.
So if you could go back, because you talked about Bernadette, some other Broadway legends, if you could swap, what Broadway legend would you love to see play the Girl Scout?
Oh, this is so, well, I mean, Kristen Chenoweth would obviously be great. I mean, a natural Sky, if there ever was one. Oh gosh, there's so many people. That's what's so beautiful about theater is that like you create something, but then you gift it to the world, and like there's gonna be it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to all these people who want to play it. And I think that's
Oh,
what's like so beautiful about theater and so exciting is that um I can't wait to see other people play it who are we don't know yet, like the future stars of the world. So I think that's like really
what
beautiful and
about a
full circle and
Lydia?
exciting.
Because you covered Lydia. What like big Broadway performer who obviously might not be in the correct age range to play her now? Who would you have
Not in the correct age
like
range.
like a big Broadway veteran? Like if we could go back and she made her debut in Beetlejuice.
Mm, this is really hard because it takes a very specific energy. Um, I mean, certainly there are a number of, I think, alphabas that would be fantastic. Um, this is such a hard. You know who I'd love to see? Oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on her name. But the woman who played Kafritz in Henry Sweet Henry, who's like a genius. She'd also be a great Girl Scout, actually. This is gonna make me nuts.
If you could go back and so for example, if you could have originated a part in Broadway musical history, because you did with Beetlejuice, obviously, but if you could go back, a role that's now iconic, if you could pick a part, what would it have been?
You know, I would love to have done Squeaky from an Assassins. I like love Assassins so much. And I mean, again, I love twisted characters, and I just think there's something so she's sort of like especially right now, she's sort of like on that precipice. She's somewhere between like child and woman. Like she's an adult, but there's something so like deeply twisted about her and childlike that she follows Charlie Manson around. You know what I mean? So you have to be missing a little bit of a chip for that, which I love.
Good way of wording it.
So
That's a good
yeah, I
one.
think that would be a really good one to do.
And then final question, many, 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 many years from here, from now, when we're all not here, how would you want people to look back and remember Dana Steingold as a person and as a performer?
Oh my gosh. I hope that people would say that I was kind and generous and that we laughed a lot together, because I think I tried to lead with that for the most part when I can. My yeah, like but I think yeah, I hope that people are like, she's cool, she's kind, and she's warm to people, and not in like a BS way, but in a real way, because I really do try to get to know people and see past, like, sometimes it takes some peeling away of layers for people, I think, who are not as naturally open. But I'm like a hugger, and I will get you to hug me back.
So when this is done, I am coming to New York. We will schedule a hug. We will get some
Yes.
coffee, and we
And we
will.
will talk about The Bachelor.
God, yes, we'll talk more about it, because at this point it's just getting like, I'm like, we gotta wrap this up. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's
Tasia,
another time.
I have some opinions on what went down last night, but
Dana, back to you. This was such a thrill, a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for sharing all things Beetlejuice, and for speaking about Michael and just your expertise and experience. And we will, when Broadway is back and up and running, I know I will be there to cheer you on with whatever you are in. So thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
I'll see you soon.
See you.
Bye bye.